feel like sometimes life is really mental.
Dude, that's actually a really good name for a podcast.
Even when you lose all hope, you go deeper than you've gone. Hold on till you can't no more.
There's footage of me as like a 3-year-old watching Rage, just so entranced by the songs. I would just sit there and like rock back and forth like to the rhythm of the song.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Really Mental, a podcast on mental health and identity, where we want you to know no matter who you are, you're not alone. Today we've got two beautiful guests on, Matt and Alex. They are amazing people. They are both musicians and producers. And today we're going to be talking about adulthood. I wanted to start off the conversation with like a really interesting kind of statement/story that my mum would always tell me about myself. And it was, I was always in such a big rush to grow up. And that was like something that she had always experienced with me since I was a kid. And that was always just like wanting to be taken seriously by adults, wanting to act more mature than my age, and just this massive rush to not just enjoy being a kid and not enjoy like the benefits of that, and always want to grow up, get my own place, do all these different things. And even now she says I'm still like that. It's a thought that I've never really had personally, but it's something that my mum has noticed throughout my whole life that I've done. You know what I mean, Will?
Growing up, I wish there was more of a blueprint for it. It looks different for everyone. And that's why I think it's important to have people like Matt and Alex come on and talk about their experiences, because I think there's a lot to be learned from older people. I noticed for me, I was always trying to, similar to Harry, like have big dreams, had big goals, and I think you should chase them. And I was always surrounding myself with people who are older than me. Like naturally, I just got along better with those people, probably because they were more mature and wanted to do the things that I was into. So I think that's important to have those guiding people. And, like I was saying before, I really wish there was like a structure on, finding your purpose, finding your path. And as a creative, I'm really excited to take you all behind the scenes on what that looks like, because Matt Corby and Alex Henriksson are two people that have had, lots of experience being artists. And I think the one takeaway for any career is if you follow your heart, then you'll end up being in the right place. And I think life's just a journey to figure out how to find and how to follow your heart. There's so much noise around us. So I think with society's expectations, it can feel like you have to make a certain amount of money by the time you reach a certain age. But just know that if you continue to put in work to something consistently, to your dream, whether that's getting a house, whether it's getting a dream job of yours, being an astronaut, if you keep plugging away, then you're going to find something along the way that gets you there, just statistically, the more days you do it. So I'm interested, Harry, how have you found life as a creative in this industry, and how have you navigated the unknowns of growing up?
Good question, actually. I think that the biggest thing for me was doing things that I love, because when you love something and when you're really passionate about it, it's not going to feel like work, and you can allow yourself to be more creative because there isn't that pressure to be doing something you don't really like. And that was probably, when I think about it, that's the main thing. I just did stuff that I loved, and I tried to put the money aside for a second, even though money is important to live, but I tried to put it aside. And if I focus on every little thing that I loved, if I put enough work into it, which didn't feel like work because I loved it, the money will come. And that's kind of like the relationship with work and money. And being a creative, it's really hard because most creatives don't make too much money. And in a society where you have to have money to live, it can be really disheartening and it can be really stressful, which can block the creative process. But I think that if you remove the side of money from it, you can really understand and really grow at your career, which can actually lead, surprisingly, to more money later on. What about you, Will?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what drives you and what fulfills you. And I think growing up, it's hard because there's so many indicators that would make us believe that money or jobs would fulfill us in some way. The reality is that I'm sure Matt and Alex are going to share is that stuff doesn't make you fulfilled, and it's about the process. So are you involved in doing everyday work that actually satisfies you? And that's a, good question. If we could inspire people out there, I would use an example. For me personally, I've been working for around 5 years, 8 if you really included high school, but I'm just going to do 5 out of school, where I haven't, it's all I've invested in myself, into my career. And now going on next year is the first time I'm going to really be able to live off myself as a creative. So you can do it. And it is a long journey to figuring out who you want to be and what you want to do. But that's why I think these podcasts are really important for being a guiding light. And, Matt Corby is someone who's had a prolific career, especially in Australia, also around the world. And you've definitely heard his songs as they played in the intro. And so it's really a privilege for Harry and I to be able to bring these guests on, and hopefully you can take something away that can help you in your journey with growing up. But just know, no matter who you aren't alone.
If you could please go and follow, like, and subscribe on the podcast on all different platforms, as well as follow us on our social platforms at Really Mental Podcast, at It's Harry Kennedy, and Will's is
at I'm Will Hyde. So with that, we're going to get into our podcast with Matt, Corby, and Alex Henriksson from Rainbow Valley Records.
Hey everyone, just want to let you know we have an Amazon AMP show with amazing guests similar to the podcast. Please go check it out on the Amazon AMP app and follow us at Really Mental. We're going to be hosting our show on Sunday at 7 p.m. PT and 10 p.m. ET. We'll see you there.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here with Matt Corby and Alex Henriksson from Rainbow Valley Records. Two people I've been very fortunate enough to work with and also be part of their journey and watch them do their thing, which has been super cool. And it's super exciting to see them on the podcast today with us to chat about adulthood, growing up. And I think that today, hopefully we can come out with a conversation that can help give some type of a roadmap for people growing up. Because Harry and I always talk about this, how we wish we had some type of blueprint to follow, like leaving high school. Because at the moment we're just trying to figure out our shit. First of all, can you both share a bit about yourselves? We'll start with Alex.
I think I got into music because mom ran restaurants when I was a kid and had musicians come and play at her restaurant. And then when I was about 15 is sort of when I found my own music, that wasn't stuff just given to me from mum, which was early 2000s. So yeah, that was punk, hardcore, emo kind of music. That's when I joined a band. Because I could play a little bit of guitar. I think I could play about 3 or 4 chords and just kind of was
you're hired.
Yeah, you're hired basically. Yeah. I was like, okay, cool. These guys are cool. And then that sort of brought me to being 18 when the band kind of broke up and I moved to Brisbane. So I was like, I'm going to be a roadie. And I became a roadie for a couple of years doing the load in, load outs at festivals. And then I learned how to be a sound guy, doing front of house stuff. It actually wasn't long after that I met Matt. So me and Matt became really good friends basically straight away. We just hit it off in a studio sort of session where we just hung out and talked music and talked shop. I think it was a couple of years maybe after us being friends that we sort of started mucking around, just making music, because Matt bought a bunch of stuff to record with. I sort of knew how to use Logic and stuff like that, and Matt was learning how to do that. Maybe he knew a little bit, but we probably knew about the same. So it was just interesting to start hooking into that stuff. And then that's sort of what started Matt and I's, relationship and career together, was just all right, let's just muck around and make some music. And that just, turned into basically the last 6 years now of making music and making records. And it's now led us up to owning our own record label. That's as short as I can probably make quite a long, in-depth story.
That was really good. I was admiring that, because when anytime anyone asks me, I'm oh my gosh, how do I condense everything to give you 8 years into a little quick piece? But that was perfect.
Well, that was almost 27 years in a.
I know. That was good. And what about you, Matt?
I mean, I always loved music. There's footage of me as a 3-year-old watching Rage and like just so entranced by the songs, I would just sit there and like rock back and forth like to the rhythm of the song, and you couldn't get me to move. I remember in grade 2, I went and sung for my music teacher, Miss Dale. Her name was Miss Dale.
Shout out, Miss
And
Dale.
yeah, I sang for her. I think it was like a song from the Sister Act 2 movie, and like she was like, "Oh, like that's pretty good. You should come and sing for the principal in her office." I was like, "All right." And then she was like, "Oh, she was this lovely principal. That's lovely, Matthew." And then the next day in assembly, the whole school's lined up. Little grade 2 me sitting in my like line. She's like, "We have this wonderful, talented student here at the school. And he's going to come up and sing for you now." No one told me. And they get me up, and I'm like shaking, like with this microphone and like this like megaphone thing. It's like the worst PA you've ever seen. And just sang for the whole school, like just did it. And from that point forward, I was just like, "Oh, you're that singer kid." So I guess like my identity just took a path, and like I learned guitar, and I got singing lessons since I was 8 or 9, or maybe younger. And then that led me to this point where I met this crew that would tour around, and they were like a religious group that would tour around schools and churches and sort of community centers and stuff. And in schools, they would just preach like a positive message, and then try and get kids to come to church on the weekends. And then we play at the churches, you know, and we did that all around Australia in a bus. I joined when I was 14. My parents let me leave school because I wasn't really enjoying high school. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then I got a job at like Subway for half a year because I couldn't get back into my high school in grade 10. And then year 11 came by, and my dad begged me to audition for Idol. But he eventually got me along, and then that whole saga began. And then, yeah, the next phase gets pretty weird because lots of ups and downs, lots of like sort of record label things that happened and then didn't happen. And I ended up like, I think at 20, losing a whole bunch of money because I sort of got into a disagreement with a guy that ran a label in the UK. And he sort of pulled the deal that I was offered from underneath me like that next day. And I sort of worked myself up into a bit of debt, spending a lot of time overseas. And yeah, I don't know. And then from that point, I don't know, I just worked at a cafe, wrote that EP that ended up doing well, that had sort of Brother on it. And started playing those garden shows, which was pretty cool. And we did like, I don't know, 75 of those. You know, we're playing sort of 500 capacity rooms. Then it sort of started to increase. And then we started to actually tour overseas. And I tried to make a record and sign a big deal, and that kind of failed. And I think that's when I started hanging out with Al after that. I moved to Brisbane. Al was really you were like my savior, man. Because I think I was stuck, and like I was a bit over music at this point. I wasn't writing a lot. I was sort of coasting.
You were playing pretty massive shows though at the time that I met you. I was like, but I think that was the thing too. It's like you'd kind of come from this big industry sort of thing, and it was just a world I had no idea about. So I think it was like refreshing for you or something to hang out with someone who just kind of didn't care, because I just didn't know. I didn't know about the industry. I didn't care about it. It wasn't something, you know, and I think now, like looking back and that sort of, you know, understanding that's where you came from, I was just like, fuck it. Let's just have fun, you know, like we don't need to impress anybody or do anything, right?
Yeah. I think I saw the dark side super early. Like, you know, that like those talent shows on TV, it's just like whatever label sort of gets the sort of licensing deals or the record deals that are attached to the end of the show with the winners or the contestants. Like, I think it was a good business model. You know, it's sort of like 6 months of marketing someone and getting the Australian public to kind of like them, and then just like hitting them with whatever generic music other writers can come up with for their singles for a year until the next ones come in. Like, it's a good money making exercise. It's really horrible for the people involved. I think I had a lot of pressure on me because I'd gained a bit of momentum, and then So I didn't really know what to do with it. And I didn't have I hadn't done the creative hours yet, I think, to keep it going.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's what buckles artists, I think, too, is like when they've done something cool and then suddenly the industry responds by going, just keep doing that again and again and again. And the artist goes, well, that's not really being an artist. Now I'm just like basically being a McDonald's for myself. That was definitely what you were looking for, Matt, was just a way to explore and get a bit weird with music and find and carve something that's new out and do a lot of it yourself too, because you were learning heaps of instruments at the time. Like I think you were kind of okay at a bunch of them, but now looking back, like how far you've come over 5 years of just being persistent in like playing drums, playing bass, playing different synthesizers, learning how they work, and then you get all these tools. So you're not constantly going like, oh, I wish I could get the best drummer in the world to come play this. It's like, well, I'll just do it myself now because like, and all those sort of roadblocks that, I think people find when they are trying to be creative, they don't exist if you just put in the hard work and the time to learn a bunch of that stuff yourself.
What was it like meeting each other for the first time? Like, what did you think of each other?
When you do sort of look at our backgrounds, we come from pretty different backgrounds. Like Matt was raised by like, a beautiful family. Not to say my family wasn't, but, I never grew up with a dad or anything like that. Matt has one of the most amazing dads I've ever met.
Legend.
Yeah, totally, JC. And I think too, just kind of that like, I was into like really heavy music, really weird music, really different stuff. And then when we sort of sat down, what we actually resonated on was kind of like more like esoteric conversation and even maybe bridging into kind of political and also sort of like conspiracy theories too. We loved talking about those. I think we're not like conspiracy theorists, but we love talking about them. And like, I'm really fascinated by like, I guess like how people think about them. Where do they come from? And we would go as far as like inventing our own ones. Like, I think that was,
but just between us, just to be like, oh, like this is definitely a theory that would exist. Like if we can think of this, there's some guy out there that's like, this is real.
Yeah. Some people would go hard, but I think we would just like it because it was creative. And that kind of, I think, is like what sort of was the foundation for like music making too. It was like when we first started like actually writing songs, we were doing the worst things possible, doing like, okay, let's invent a number for a BPM that is like really stupid. Instead of just being like 190 BPM, we'd be like, let's do 191.748946342 just to like see that.
So you'd have fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. And like, let's do bars of 6 and then let's do bars of 8 and like, let's not have choruses and like, like it was that rebellion, I think, is basically what it is to the normal that was like at the core of us.
I was going to say like being creative for yourself rather than for other people. How have you been able to get yourself to that point? Because I feel like a lot of creatives try and be creative for other people to like approve of their creativity sometimes rather than being creative because they want to be creative.
We're a bit stubborn in a lot of ways. Like if someone was like, do this, like you can basically forget about it. Like not only are we not going to do that, but we're going to go and do the opposite of that just to spite you for like trying to tell us what to fucking do. Like, that was like, I think a whole, like why we just got along so well as well is like, we don't need to be told what to do. There doesn't need to be this like end goal to anything of like impressing anyone but our friends. And like, I think that's the community we came from as well, was like, all we wanted to impress was our close group of friends. It was like, that was the people that were like the pinnacle to us. And if it happened to get out further than that, that's cool. But it definitely, it's not really the driving force.
I wanted to ask, was there ever a moment in either of your careers where you were like, oh, maybe music isn't for me? Maybe I should quit because I'm not enjoying this, or like something around that?
Yeah, I've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
Music's a tough one because your livelihood is based on other people's opinions solely. You can be as good as you can be and still have everyone go, no, I don't like it. It's not my vibe. And, like, that's like, oh shit, man. Like this is the culmination of 10 years worth of experience that went into this. And like, it's not your vibe. It's like, okay, all right, back to the drawing board. That shit, it's tough. So yeah, you do get to points where you're like, okay, I'm exhausted. and maybe I should just go and be a chippy, or like going to have like a job that like would just be like with my hands, and like something that I can clock off at the end of the day and switch my mind off. Because I think when you're in sort of music land, it's hard to get out. It's
So hard.
yeah, it becomes a bit of an obsession, and it's like this ever changing, moving sort of puzzle. So yeah, and you kind of got to stay on top of it or something. Like you got to be
Yeah.
ready to like receive the ideas when they come, and make sure you somehow like get them into some real space or something.
I think being in a position to get those like ideas as well, you know, like there is that sort of esoteric nature to songwriting where like, you know, where do ideas come from? Is it a mixture of like who and what you are? And then there is a mixture of that, you know, the divine, you know, sort of channeling through you or something. And that's where like mental health becomes basically the pinnacle of whether or not you're going to make anything good. And I'm not to say like if you're in a bad place or anything mentally that you could still make something good and amazing, because that might be the release and the end of that story for you. But there's so much to do with how your head is to like, you know, if you can focus in the studio, or if you're going to sit down at a drum kit or a piano or just a computer and just be like, my mind is just not here. And that is probably the biggest roadblock. And probably the thing that, would make me be like, oh, maybe I should just go be a chef or something like that, you know, or get back into coffee like I used to, where you literally show up at 5 a.m. and you leave at midday and that's it. There's no more thinking about it. It's not like, oh, you know, customer number 12 today, I didn't really pull his shot very well, so I'm going to sit here like torturing myself over that. Whereas there's so many opportunities in music to find ways to torture yourself that kind of, at the end of the day, sort of mean nothing, you know, because you can always just go and do something else and like make a new song, and then people maybe forget about the last one that you did or something, and then just move on.
It's so interesting. Like, I want to jump in there because I was saying, Harry, I was making something for like 8 hours last night. And at the end of it, I was like, I don't like this. And I spent like 4 hours on something else and everything flowed. And I really liked what I got out of it. Do you ever think about the fact that like when you're really in the flow of something, like just everything sounds good? Like, do you ever have those moments where it's like, damn, everything's lining up. Like when I put this sample in, it was perfect. Or like when I switched those chords, instead of like a guitar, I put a piano and it was great. Do you ever have that and like appreciate those moments as well?
Yes, definitely. That's like the drug bit, I think.
It is.
I reckon that's almost like a flow state thing. When you're operating left and right brain, you're like the computer, the music, everything like you're doing is intentional.
Yeah.
I have my little moments in life where like I'll full like shadow box, or I'll be like dancing around and he's like, yo, we got it. It's feeling good. Like that is so important to like
appreciate
have those moments of excitement. Like you like find that. I think that's when you're like at peak creativity, like in search of the thing that makes you feel like happy. Like you must be doing something like right. I don't know. And like to celebrate that moment.
That's the payoff, especially because I find as well, and I'm interested to see what you all think, but for me personally, as a creative, it makes those points make the self-critical times when it isn't going right so worth it. Like that, as you were saying, that's the drug. How do you guys push through those points when you're like, damn, like everything's just sounding pretty dusty today?
Stop.
Oh, no. Stop. Yeah. Go and refill the cup. I think like,
yeah.
I don't know if I read about it, if I heard about it, but I heard like, you know, Frank Ocean does that. Like he's not like always in the studio. He goes and like experiences life and, you know, fills up his cup of creativity. And I think that's sometimes just all you really need to do. It's like, I think The Alchemist, that book kind of talks about those things. And then there's the movie like Orange County that kind of reflects on it, where, you know, everyone's trying to like think that they need something else to become who they truly are. And everything that you have, everything that you need, you already have, you know, and if you're not recognizing that, then you're just working against the universe, and you're thinking you're better than it or bigger than it, and you're not.
For both of you, like, or all three of you actually, I have a question. Not everyone necessarily listening to this would be in the creative field. If you were to describe creativity and both the like upside and the downfall of being a creative person, like how would you best describe those emotions and that whole experience?
I think it's so much about balance. Like, you really need to find a way to balance everything. And it comes down to like all the way to the EQs and compression and the way the song's put together to how your life's put together. If you're out of balance and out of whack, like, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to work. Life is never perfect, you know, like, you're not even going to be able to appreciate the wins if you don't have a few losses.
Yeah, I think it's a funny internal battle. You have to sort of self-motivate, and I think a lot of creative people finding that self-motivation stuff is like really hard. I definitely feel moments when the tank is empty and I'm like, yeah, I got to stop. Like, if I keep doing this, I'm just going to like get stressed and frustrated. And that could just be from, I might have just made like 3 or 4 tracks in a row that I just wasn't happy with. It's like, no, they're just what a waste of a week, you know. But not necessarily, because I could come back the next week and then have unlocked some, like, you know, way that I can put a vibe down just because of the last sort of 3 failures that I made.
Yeah, I was reading this thing on creativity, and they were saying creative people need to have breaks to maintain their creativity. Because when you're always, I feel like, putting something out that's very personal to yourself, there's only so much you can give and give and give to your creativity before it kind of like gets drained, which is what you were kind of explaining, of like just looking and not having anything come up. And this was kind of just saying that like one of the most important things of being creative is actually taking time to rest and taking time to decompress, because you're always constantly, I feel like, giving and putting yourself out there in, like, even if it's not for other people, even yourself, just putting out your emotions through, whether it's music, art, all these different creative avenues that could be a thing.
It's a lot, because especially these days, once you release a song, that's one part of it, then you market it, and if it does well, you react to that. And I think being a creative these days, in whatever field you're in, is about being flexible. For instance, 2 days ago, I was sitting on my couch and I got a DM from someone, and she was like, you just got played by like one of the biggest K-pop stars on their live stream, like your song. And I was like, oh, that's so sick. And our reaction and like my reaction for the next few days and up until 3 a.m. as well last night is like responding to that moment and like all these people that now suddenly know the song. So I think that in itself is its own challenge, because like I was saying before we actually got on this podcast, like, it's so nice to get a break up from that, because I think I've been trying to figure out the balance with like managing that. It feels like sometimes there's always stuff to do. That's the extra stuff, even outside of just the song that comes with it.
I just like had to disengage from all of that completely, I think, in order to be productive. I think a lot of creative people are so sensitive to how they're being perceived, like, and social media amplifies that so much, and it sort of creates probably like 2.5 hours per day of unnecessary thinking time. I would hate to try and be breaking my like music career now just because of how entrenched social media is in music sort of marketing. I mean, I would recommend for most creative people to pretty much just step back from it. Like, honestly, I mean, there's ways you can do it from a distance, you know, unless you really enjoy like sharing your life. I don't know. I just feel like, for the sake of your own mental health, I mean, you're already judged enough as it is. You know, your art's already there to be judged. It's like you're going like, yeah, here's my art, here's my personality, here's my new hairdo, here's my
life.
new picture that I want to put on something, like, and it's just like giving people too much right to have an opinion when like they already get to have one, you know, with the art form that you're actually, you know, trying to contribute to. So yeah, I mean, I don't envy that. Like, I don't envy people that are going through that, because I think it's something you probably need a good shrink for to try and navigate that world. And I definitely am an advocate for finding a good therapist or a psychiatrist or something.
For sure.
I've been seeing someone who's amazing, just like getting to talk through so much stuff that like you just don't know that is kind of there. I mean, but it's the stuff that it kind of forms your like fundamental sense of self, like the mental space that you kind of operate in predominantly or like subconsciously, which it's been good trying to unravel that. And I think a lot of musos probably, have a lot of kind of weird trauma with like ego trauma, because it's just been like battered around so much, and they go one or two ways, where they like start flexing how hard, or they just fucking freak out and they go, no, I can't do this anymore. So removing yourself from it is great, because I don't know how my stuff goes. When I put music out, I'm just like, someone calls me like a month out, I really like that song. It's like, oh, cool. Like I would have no idea until we maybe start selling tickets, and like, it saves me a world of hurt, I think. And even seeing positive stuff fucks with you, like, because it's not real and it's not your business. You know what I mean? Someone else's opinion of you is really not your business. Sadly, with music, it kind of like, it is business, but like it's something that you can't take on. And I think like that's something I'm trying to learn too, and I think I've learned slowly, is separating like yourself personally from the work.
I think too, like if you spent more time on like actually investing in your craft, and whether your craft is music or art or modeling or anything like that, if you actually spent time doing that rather than worrying too much about social media. I think social media is great. Like, show people your shows, show people when you're on a shoot, show people like, in a studio, like all that stuff is interesting and fascinating to people. And you still get to then go home and be yourself, and you don't have to share all your deepest, darkest secrets if you don't want to, or what you've had for breakfast, or just your day-to-day kind of living, which a lot of people do love sharing and a lot of people love watching. But I think as a musician, if you just show, the actual things that are surrounding the work rather than all the other stuff that's around that, you can have that real distinct separation with it all. And rather than worrying about it so much, it's like go and write another song, or like or call a friend, call somebody who's in your industry and say good day. You never know what that conversation is going to turn into, what that could spark. It could get you a job. It could get you writing music with someone. There's, everything I think comes from those real outputs rather than like somebody seeing something that you've done on social media. That's more just reminding people that you exist. But if your craft is music, don't try and make your craft social media as well, because you're just kind of splitting yourself over two areas.
I think it's a really difficult line to walk, being a musician trying to market yourself on social media. I don't think a lot of people really enjoy having musicians be like, hey, buy my single, like, or listen to my thing or whatever.
I think there's this need to be validated from people as well, which is where social media comes from. Being a creative and having those external perspectives and having people tell you that you're all like, you're great and you're doing amazing, kind of brings out this whole sense of, oh, I'm on the right path, and kind of sense of encouragement, I guess, which technically isn't really that healthy, because you should be comfortable in yourself to do what you want to do rather than getting external validation. Social media is one of the biggest things that I struggle with from a anxiety perspective and overthinking on engagement. How many people are seeing this? Why didn't this do as well? Why didn't people react as good as this? And thinking about all these things to the point where I'll just delete Instagram off my phone. I wanted to ask both of you guys, I saw Matt, you've said a few times you're not really active on social media. How have you gotten to a point where you've kind of separated yourself from these things that are said to be so vital in a creative's career and in this whole area of your work? I
think I just half of it's probably just been luck, to be honest. I did use it at the start, like Instagram, like, 7 years ago or whatever, when it first came out. you know, I was posting like pictures of like, here's a park I'm in, or like,
Yeah, I think I saw that ages ago when I was looking. It was like a bird or something.
yeah, like I was on a boat. I was like, hey, a bird, like,
I missed that Instagram, by the way, real quick. Bring that back. Let's flip the camera.
yeah.
I think over time as well, attention spans have gotten less and less. That's why we've seen the rise of TikTok and video content, and like it's taking up too much of my time, and I want to focus my time on the podcast, on the actual things that I do enjoy, not just like staring at a screen the whole time and looking at numbers go up.
That's the thing, dude. That's the biggest realization I've had, and it's taken me like a long time to figure that out. And there's this amazing psychologist that talks about this, and Dr. DeMartini. I was reading his book, and he talks about how there's two sides to everything. Like we either live in fantasy or phobia. So we just oscillate between the two in life, chasing things external to us or being scared of them and scared of gaining those potential opportunities or whatever it is we want to avoid. And I realized that so much. And the interesting thing is that really frustrated me for a long time is not being able to enjoy the process, because I'm sure we can all agree here that the actual goal that you have in your head, that never actually like feels as good as you think it's going to feel. Like when you get that much money in your bank account because you're like want to get out of home and stuff, it actually doesn't end up satisfying you as much as maybe you would think. And so I had that realization that I was getting all these gifts and stuff from the universe of just things going well, but I would never take the time to be like, I'm so grateful for this today. I was so focused on the future, which was the fantasy I was living in of, I want to get this to let's say 10 million streams, which is a complete made up land that I'm living in. I'm trying to take more time to be grateful for the love that we do get, and also remind myself of the fact that everything has a yin and yang. Like success comes at the cost of having to work so much more, and maybe you get super exhausted. It's always this duality that we're experiencing. And Alex and I were talking about that the other day.
I can tell you too that like doing the opposite is kind of just as bad. And Matt and I were sort of like that. We spent 5 years like probably like barely talking to anyone else. We almost could have got lost in that area too of just like, because we have friends that have gotten lost, you know, who don't want to contribute anymore, or it feels like that, you know, it feels like they've been beaten. And so it's just totally about finding that middle ground that you're kind of comfortable with and your own sort of channels in which to connect.
I wanted to delve down an area of mental health and ask both of you guys, when you first realized you were experiencing some troubles within your mental health, like anxiety, depression, any of these different types of things, that you realized, oh, like I really need to start taking some time for myself.
I've gone through a few stages like that. I think I've done it properly only recently, post-COVID. I think a lot of people stuck with themselves and then forced to kind of sort a bunch of stuff out that they hadn't sorted out for a long time. It's been really good. It's been good to recognize it and just be like, yeah, cool. I'm just going to go and sort this out, like, and just be honest. And because it's kind of annoying. It's like, because it's like maintenance, really. It's like maintenance work on your brain, and you have to sort of admit that you're a failure. Like everyone's a failure, you know. And that's cool. Like we're all just sort of failing spectacularly together, like, you know. Yeah. And like I think taking that approach with therapy has been good, you know. It's definitely like helped calm my crazy thoughts when I get them, you know. My therapist said that a lot of the Western world hasn't figured out how to calm the mad monkey of the mind, and that's his way of sort of talking about it. And everyone has their own sort of mad monkey that forces them to either like to fixate on themselves or worry, be in fear, be in regret, be depressed. That's the monkey just like basically destroying your moment that you have in life, this constant moment. I think we live in a world that is just so overstimulating and insane that like everyone sort of needs to decompress and readjust and like we are resilient too, and it can become so quickly desensitized and just soldier on. I mean, look at how quickly, I mean, the majority of us just transformed within a couple of months, just adapted to life with masks in lockdown, like QR code rules, all that shit that you just like, yeah, cool, whatever. Like, okay, yeah, I got my mask on, yeah, bro. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. Anyway, I'm just rambling again.
How do you tame your monkey though? Like for those listening, what are some things that could help with trying to tame the monkey inside?
Don't get advice from me. I think it's more like, I think, yeah, your monkey is that thing that impedes on your, like, you know, your social media and the monkey are like one. You know, that thought process that you would have about like what's going on there and what does that person think about me? Is it getting likes? You know, that's the monkey. You know, also just like, you're a piece of shit, man. You're never amount to anything. That's the monkey. Like, and I think recognizing that that's just like a dumb thought. Not a lot of people are well equipped to even recognize that and start to be like, okay, cool. No, shush my brain. I'm just gonna reset and like go and play the Moog, or like go and like build some Legos with my kid, or like whatever, you know. And that's kind of how you tame it. Once you're aware of it, you just go, oh, like give it a name. That's what my therapist told me. You give your monkey a name.
I know the conversation I've had with my therapist, because this is one of the things we're slowly dealing with, is these internal battles with these thoughts. It's an idea. It's like take it any way you want. It works for me at least, is becoming friends with the monkey. I'm going to use the monkey analogy, but kind of being really friendly towards it and like allowing it to come in and kind of not being so hesitant and asking it questions, like having this internal conversation with why it's being mean. Why are you saying this stuff? Like, why are you treating yourself badly? It breaks it down and it helps me understand, okay, so like, why are you saying this? Like, what is the reasoning? And you just understand it's like this little scared, I like to say alien, but like monkey inside of you is kind of just scared and coming from this place of fear.
The inner child.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's like, doesn't feel like it's me. It feels like an external being inside of me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, because you're starting to separate who you really are from the thoughts in which attack who you are. Like, and giving that, if you give that its own space, then you're already creating a barrier. I think that's great. Like, you're recognizing it as separate, because if you don't recognize it as separate, you'll believe everything that your thoughts tell you. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that. And that's why a lot of people get extremely depressed, and why a lot of people get extremely anxious. And sometimes their depression and anxiety can be fully justified by the things going on in their life, but that's the monkey. You know what I mean? The monkey's justifying it. Sometimes it's hard, but being able to recognize it and separate that and be like, oh, you know, fuck off. What's her name? Monkey, whatever you call him or her. Like, if you can keep practicing that, I think it's kind of like the beginning of meditating, really.
If you think too, like that you want to be creative in a good sense, get ready, because you're just going to be as creative in a dark sense. And it just balances itself out. You push out this bubble.
So true.
You know, so like that's like the big warning to like creative people. It's like if you really want to get like really deep on some amazing shit, really get ready, because your brain is very capable of coming up with some very creative, dark stuff. And that's super scary. That's like, but then again, we wouldn't have some of the best horror movies and some of the most amazing sci-fi if people didn't have those thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all they are. And they don't exist. But for me, what always gets me out of it, even above that, is my mates. Like, nothing beats hanging out with my buddies and talking shit. And like, literally that just like reminds me that, you know, no matter what, they've got my back and I've got theirs. And, you know, I probably got 5 close friends, you know, really close friends nowadays. Like, it's hard to keep close friends and to keep, you know, running a business and stuff. So I really thrive when I get to see them.
I wanted to retrace back to something Alex said earlier, and Matt has said as well, with trying to impress friends, and that should be the main thing that you guys focus on. How have you been able to surround yourself with the right friends and the right group of people?
By chance, really. I guess when you meet someone and you vibe with them, that's a friend. I mean, it's all just how you maintain the relationship. You definitely would have found those people like how you two met. Like
Yeah.
you would have just clicked and just been like, man, you're a G. Yeah, this is awesome. Like we share a lot of the same ideas. I think that those are the people that you should trust. And it's also just knowing what other people's taste is like. If you respect their taste, you're like, okay, cool. Let's put this to the test.
We're pretty, like, I would say, like, pretty brutal as well with vibes and friends. Like, we're pretty closed off. Neither Matt and I use like social media, like really at all. I mean, I use Messenger, but I generally call people, as Will would know. If I have like an idea or something, I'd probably just pick up my phone and I'll call you. And that's sort of how I keep in touch. And it sucks too. Like, we're Matt and I are both 30 now. So even some of our closest friends, I think over the years who did tap out of music and tap out of creativity, sometimes you not as close anymore, and that kind of sucks, but it's a reality, I guess, of growing up. And it can be hard to keep friends who aren't doing a similar thing to you and you're still doing the thing maybe that was their dream, and that's tough. That's really tough to kind of lose those people. But it definitely makes me appreciate the ones that stick around. I talk to Matt probably more than I talk to anyone. We generally talk in the mornings and in the evenings is kind of like the vibe, because we're friends first and foremost, but we work together as well. So that's like how we also do work. We like to talk about it. I'm not sending him emails with spreadsheets and stuff like that. We have people that do that for us, which is amazing. And we also have people that interpret that for us, which is amazing as well. And it lets us be real and be human with people. I'm just a big believer in like, staying in touch, and you just never know. Like even young Will here, like I talk to him a bunch more than I talk to some of my older friends, just because I know when I call him to talk about mental health or to talk about Eastern medicine or Reiki or something, that I'm going to be met with like excitement and keenness, not like, oh, that's some hippie bullshit or whatever, you know what I mean?
Fact.
It's like,
Yeah.
I want to talk to friends who are interested in shit that I'm interested in as well. I'm fairly stoic on the outside. I'm not super animated, so I do like to call people who ignite that animation for me through them.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how things change too. And I think knowing that like you like to call and stuff, like that's important, because as you get busier, as naturally as we do, and like we've all got things we're trying to achieve and different goals, you get less time. It's like that opportunity cost. And so it's been cool to watch you both do your thing, and Alex as well get super busy. So now I know just to call him instead of sending him a meme from Reddit. I think with that, boys, thank you for your time. I want to end it with a simple note of like connection. If there's anything we've learned from COVID, make sure you take the time to like reach out to someone you care about, or like just thinking about someone is such a beautiful thing. And I think I just really appreciate how we ended on that note, because it's so important. Like no matter what you get up to in life or achieve, the relationships is all we're left with when we're like 80 years old and just chilling in a retirement home. So take care of those, my people. And thank you, Maddie and Alex, so much for your time. This conversation had a lot of substance, and for me personally, I feel lived up to the fantasy I had in my head. So I appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
So I really, really loved that chat with Matt and Alex. I think I took a lot of different things out of it. I think the main thing was the hardships that social media brings to people's mental health. And I know even for me specifically, like social media has really made me doubt myself a lot, because I've been comparing myself to a lot of people and worrying about things like engagement. If people are seeing this, what are they thinking? Is this the right post to be putting out for my brand? Like all these things that have like piled up over time and given me immense anxiety and stress. But I think what's helped is taking a step back and like allocating breaks. So like on the weekends, not really using social media, potentially deleting social media off my phone, just so I can have that break and I can have that downtime off it. And I know Matt and Alex have both said that they barely use social media. They're not really on it. How have you found your relationship with social media as being, Will?
It's really interesting hearing from Matt and Alex because they have some wisdom in the sense that they have been able to live life without it, and it wasn't as big back then. And so we got to see the perspective of people who aren't on it and their reasoning behind it. And I think it's really healthy to take those breaks. And it's something I'm figuring out, even going into having a holiday next week. It's like, feels weird that I'm like not going to post. Like, what am I going to do? Like, because I'm so used to having to be switched on all the time. But lastly, for me, another takeaway I found was we touched on friends towards the end of the podcast, and we only spoke about it for a bit, but I just want to reiterate the fact that that's so important. Outside of the work and our busy lives, like when things settle down, it's really what we're left with is the people in our life. So it's so important to keep track of those friendships and take care of those relationships and look out for people, check up on someone that you haven't spoken to in a while that you appreciate. So thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Really Mental.
Thank you.
And no matter who you are, know that you're not alone. Make sure you follow us and leave a review of this podcast. Follow us on social media at Really Mental Podcast. Follow Harry at It's Harry Kennedy and me at I Am Will Hyde. And we're still trying to figure out our community name for the Really Mental family. So if you have any ideas for our community, our squad, let us know. DM us on Instagram.
See you next week.
Special guest coming.
Even when you lose all hope, you go deeper than you've gone. Hold on till you can't no more. It's really mental.
Hey everyone, we have a Really Mental show on the Amazon Air app, and we're going to be hosting live conversations with talented humans like you hear on our podcast. We're even going to be having some of the same guests on, meaning you can ask them questions and hear us chat more about mental health and growing up. So follow us at Really Mental on the Amazon Air app, and we'll see you there for conversations at 7 p.m. PT, 10 p.m. ET every Sunday. Because we want you to know no matter who you are, you're not alone.
I just want to end this episode today, Will, by talking directly to the audience, saying if you guys are struggling, Will and I aren't professionals in this field. We're just telling our experiences through stories and kind of just sharing what we've been through. But if you are really struggling, we do highly suggest going to see a therapist and professional help, because they will be the ones that can really help you in your situation.
Of course, feel free to share your stories with us and DM us. We want to know what you're going through, but make sure you take the time to speak to a professional, because that's going to give you the most help. That said, we hope that these stories and the people we've spoken to can really help you on your journey to finding that right person, whether it's a therapist or that friend to talk to about it. Make sure you take the time to do that.